Hello and bienvenue to Life's Questions and Lessons. I am your host, Charity Youngblood, and I am so excited that you are here with me today. This podcast is unedited because life is unedited. Now let's get started with our first question. How do I share my story? How do I share my story? So after starting this podcast and really having it evolve into a business, I decided to start a newsletter. And I've been writing since I was very young. I still consider myself a writer because my most natural form of self-expression is writing. And so it was a kind of a natural pivot for me. And I chose LinkedIn, creating LinkedIn articles. And so I started that for about 6 months or so, and then pivoted into the LinkedIn newsletter. And I decided that that could be an extension or another way of me sharing my story. But I wanted to bring this question specifically to the podcast because I do feel there's a lot of people who have knowledge and have something to share. And you might be one of those people. Maybe you think I have ideas, I have a certain perspective, but I'm not really that interesting. First of all, you are, because you're listening to this podcast. So already, I'm telling you right now, you're interesting. You are fascinating. And your story really does need to be heard. And one of my Wise Counsel members was actually asking me about sharing my story in the content of copy. So basically in writing form. And she found it was very difficult for her to create articles. So as you're exploring this question for yourself, one additional way you can look at this, or an additional question to explore, could be, what is preventing me from sharing my story? So for me, when I was thinking about writing articles, very similar to this podcast is only 5 minutes long. It's short, it's simple, it's straight to the point. That is who I am in my normal life. So when I was thinking about writing an article, I wanted to also make sure that time was respected. Your time was respected as well as my time. So the newsletter is like 3 sentences. It's not 5,000 pages or words. So as you're thinking of how do I share my story, think about what is important to you as well. There are barriers sometimes that prevent us from doing whatever it is that we want to do. And I think it's very important to evaluate those barriers under, your perspective, under the lens that you see the world. So if time is a barrier for you, understand that there are ways to still get your story out there, right? To create the content, to create the podcast, to create the video, to create the newsletter, the article, in whatever way works best for you. So those are the questions I had on my heart today. And if you are in a place where you have been thinking about sharing your story and you're just not really sure how to do it, I really challenge you to take some time with these questions, as well as the questions that come up for you as you're exploring these topics and these questions. So those are the things that I had on my heart today. Please rate and review this podcast wherever you are listening to my words. And if this episode was helpful for you, please share it. We are here on this planet to help each other. So if this episode was helpful for you, please share it. And until next time, take care.